The purpose of this trip, of course, was to expose us to the traditional cuisine of Catalonia. I was asked to make the Suquet.
Suquet, which is an original fisherman's meal, which is water, potatoes, and fish.
All of the traditions of making the sofrito were there, having a nice rich broth. And Suquet is a very old traditional recipe and cooking style that is noticeable, especially on the Mediterranean. It was really developed by the fishermen, and they'd be out on the boats and they would cook this stew of particular fishes. Every good dish, of course, begins with prepping, and in this case, we're going to be prepping what's known as a sofrito, or sofregit, I believe it's called in Catalan. And it's nothing more than a combination of onions and garlic and tomatoes. It's a process of finely chopping or grating onions and tomatoes and garlic, and then cooking down in olive oil till you start to evaporate that moisture, and just keep on cooking, keep on cooking. But the onions have got to first get really well caramelized before the tomatoes and the garlic go in, and then they can get cooked down as well. But the onions won't go any further and they won't get any darker. The powder that he's using is it's a rich paprika. This wasn't actually a smoky paprika like we're so familiar with the pimenton paprika of Oliveira. This is just a paprika, very rich, but no smoke, but nice and peppery, nice and strong. So the sofrito needs to be cooked very, very slowly to increase their flavor by releasing moisture and evaporating moisture, and then you've got that concentration of the natural sugars that are in these vegetables, and the flavors get stronger and more balanced. The fish that we chose are considered rockfish, and they come from the areas off of the Barcelona coast, shallow areas, rocky waters that really only the smaller fishermen can get to. These are used to develop a good rich broth, and they're typical ones. There's a crustacean, there are some smaller rockfishes that wouldn't be suitable necessarily to serve along with the Suquet, but they're there to build the flavor of the broth, and they work really well. Anytime, of course, you're going to be filleting a fish for some kind of a seafood stew, you've got to clean those scales out. You've got to get the gills out. You want to take as much of the blood in any of the deep channels out. This way, you're going to end up with a really good, clean-looking broth as well as a nice, rich and sweet broth. So the fish that are going to be used for the stock first get sweated in a pot, and they all go in there. And of course, in the sweating process with the oil, you're going to evaporate moisture, you're going to concentrate flavor, and it all keeps coming back to the idea of this word suquejar, which means to seep and exude flavor out of. So all these techniques are there to enrich the flavor and make a successful Suquet. All right, so in a Suquet, the next step is to introduce the potato, and the potato is a very important part of the dish. Potatoes, of course, are loved all over Spain, as well as in Catalonia. But what they like to do with them, they like to sweat them, and also to release some of the moisture and to kind of caramelize them very, very lightly along with the sofrito. And then we add the rich fish broth. The broth that goes into the sweated potatoes and the sofrito, of course, needs to be strained first. So you end up with a nice clean broth at the end, and the only identifiable ingredients are those that you want to eat. Once you believe that the potatoes are to the point of being close to being done, you want to time the addition of the fish so as they cook, the potatoes don't overcook, but the fish gets perfectly cooked, and you're getting close to the end of this dish. So now these are the final garnishes. The addition of this fish, it'll take probably about 10 minutes, and that's at a low simmer. So the fish that they selected and have evolved to become part of the Suquet are these particular fishes that have a muscle tissue that when they're cooked in liquid, the flesh doesn't break down, it stays whole. So it not only emits a lot of good juice and a lot of flavor, you end up with a really great texture, and that's unusual. We didn't work with recipes. Many of us are already familiar with this dish, but I think to do it where its home is, and to do it with chefs like these, it's just a great experience for us as well. A recipe really isn't necessary, so I understand the principles, and now I've got the most authentic fish, and I've got catalones behind me, and I think it's going to be great.